Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first coincidence miracle this week goes back about 45 years ago when I was a young man. I was awakened one night about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was inspired. I knew it was God who did that, so I was inspired that it was Him, and I was accustomed to being inspired. And as you heard on prior weeks, we get ideas. Sometimes we have dreams because God sends us ideas to dream about, and sometimes we get ideas because God is trying to prod us and nudge us and prompt us to do something. So I was familiar with His sending us ideas and inspirations, and so when I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning from a sound sleep, I knew it was Him, and I asked, Lord, why did you wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning? And He said, I want you to go down to the kitchen and write a letter to the man having heart surgery tomorrow. Your wife will be going to visit him, and she can take the letter in. And I need you to get downstairs because the children are sleeping. Your wife is sleeping upstairs. So I went down to the kitchen, and I started to write, and I thought, golly, I was still a young man, and I didn't have all the answers, And I said, Lord, I don't know what to write to somebody having heart surgery. I don't want to cause him a problem and cause a heart attack by saying the wrong thing. So please inspire me. What should I write? And so God did. He inspired me with the words, which come from Psalm 51, actually. Created me a new heart, O God. So I got inspired what to write, and I wrote the words. And when I finished writing the words that God inspired me to write, the record player went on all by itself in the living room. I heard the record player start up. I heard the needle come down on the record, and I heard the music begin to be sung. It was a song by Western Priory, a group of monks who made some music in those days, and they were singing Psalm 51. In fact, the words they sang in the beginning of the record were exactly what I had just written. So let me just summarize that. I was awakened at 3 in the morning. I was asked to go down to the kitchen and write something. I asked God, what should I write? He inspired me what words to say. And when I finished, not before I finished, but when I finished, almost exactly as I finished, the record player went on and sung the same exact words, which were, created me a new heart, O God. So that was a tremendous coincidence miracle. The fact that the record player went on all by itself at 3 o'clock in the morning was totally amazing. And I said this was a long time ago when I was still a young man, but it helped me to live the kind of life I did because these things were happening to me at an early age. And so I've had many, many years, 53 years now, of tremendous miracles from God. And some of the things I believe are no longer beliefs, but I know. You can believe in a certain person and a certain person's qualities for many years, but when you meet them, then it's not just believing. So I've met God so many times by his wonderful blessings in my life, and I feel I know him in many, many ways now, not just believe in him, believing alone. Our next coincidence miracle has to do with a friend of mine. I've known her for quite a long time, and she told me about this miracle just recently. She had some stressful things she was trying to make decisions about, and so she asked God to please give her a fleece. And as explained on prior weeks, fleecing in scriptural terms, in religious terms, is where we ask God to give us a clue, sometimes 2 or 3 clues, to convince us that we're really hearing from him, that we're not just imagining things in our own mind. So when you're trying to make a very serious decision, many people in the Bible have done this. They've asked for fleeces from God. The most famous and easiest one to read about is in the book of Judges, chapter 6. So if you read in the book of Judges, chapter 6, about General Gideon, you'll understand what fleecing is about. And we cover it well with a lot of examples in my 2 books as well. And the 2 books are titled Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. But in any event, she told me, because it was in my book, that she used fleecing, and she was so glad that she did. So she asked God to give her a clue of how she would know that he was really telling her what to do with some very, very major, serious decision she was making. And she had asked God to give her 3 fleeces, not just 1, but 3, so she would be positive she was doing his will. And so one of the things that he inspired her to look for was that she would see a symbol or a picture of keys, keys that open up locks. One of the things she would see is she would see keys before noon on the next day. And as soon as she got this inspiration, and she had her 3 fleecing inspirations, her 3 things that had to happen by noon the next day, as soon as that was agreed to her with her, she made up her mind that that was her agreement, and she wouldn't change her mind. She was babysitting her 3-year-old grandson, and he proceeded to go to a box somewhere in the living room and open it up, and started pulling things out, throwing them all over the living room. And she noticed it about, 30 seconds after he was into it, and he was making quite a mess. So she called out to him and told him not to do that, to stop, and he wasn't listening. He was having a good time pulling things out. But she was so amazed because suddenly he pulled out of this box a ring with several keys on it, and he lifted it up and showed it to her. Imagine now, she got a fleecing inspiration from God that she would see a symbol or a picture or a sign of keys that open locks. And as soon as she got that idea, God had inspired a 3-year-old child to start digging in a box, and he pulled out the keys. The 3-year-old child pulls the keys out and shows it to her. I mean, it's so amazing that God practically told the young child to do this for him. And that's how God works with inspiring us and giving us ideas. It's perfectly clear that he gave the child an idea, an inspiration, 3-year-old child, and I don't think anybody has explained to him yet who God is, etc. So this was an excellent example of how God sends ideas and inspirations to everyone on the planet when he's trying to nudge us and prompt us to do his will. Our next coincidence miracle is one that we've talked about on prior radio shows, but I had a friend of mine call, and he told me he read both of our books about coincidence miracles, and about fleecing. And also the suggestion in the book, when you're planning projects and planning out your day or your week, it's a good idea to ask God to inspire you what things to do when and which things to do first, because God knows all things. And so he was new at this, but he tried it. He thought, I'll ask God to inspire me what things to do in what order this day. And so the first thing he was inspired to do on his long list for the day was to call his nurse. The nurse had a message from the doctor from the prior day, and they did not connect and finally talk about it. So he was inspired to call the nurse first thing this morning and get that taken care of. So he reaches for the phone, and the phone rang, and he picks it up and says hello, and it turns out it was the nurse calling him. Now, you've heard about this kind of a coincidence miracle many times, but maybe you didn't hear about planning your day and asking God what items to do first, second, and third, etc. And so in both cases, you get blessed by God by asking him what to do and then, doing things in his order. You see, he knew the nurse was going to be calling and exactly what time she would be calling. Our next coincidence miracle is from one of our listeners. He wrote in and explained how he was taking an old television that was about 13 years old, and he was going to be reusing it in a rec room, rumpus room that he was setting up in his house. And so he took it out of the attic or the garage. It was in storage someplace. He took it out of there and he put it into the rumpus room, and he was inspired that he should check it out. And when he checked it out, he found out that he needed to adjust the voice and the picture, and it was a 13-year-old TV. And it occurs to him while he's doing this, it enters into his mind, he gets an idea that he'd better find the owner's manual, because he doesn't remember after 13 years now how to adjust the volume, the voice, and the picture. And so he asks God to inspire him about where that manual is, because he hasn't seen it probably in the last 10 years anyway, and he had no idea where it might be. So he asked God to please inspire him. And immediately as soon as he asked God to inspire him, he had something like a picture in his mind of a pile of papers that he's often seen in the attic, and it's very visible to him. He saw it often enough when he was in the attic. So he went right to the attic and went right to the pile, and sure enough, there it was. It was in a large pile of a lot of papers and other manuals. Pretty significant that he asked God where it might be. He gets a picture of it immediately. God doesn't need to think about it and take a couple of days to get back to us. Typically, we find when you ask God a question, you get your answer immediately, even if the answer might be, ask me on Wednesday or Friday coming up, because God knows that you're asking too early for an answer. Our next coincidence miracle is from one of our listeners who was driving to the airport at the end of a vacation, and they were going to be turning in their car. They had a rental car. And just before they turned in the rental car, they got a notice from the airline that the airline had rebooked the flight for the next day, 24 hours ahead next day. And they felt very blessed by that, because now at least they would still have a car for 24 hours because they got the message early enough. And then when they got to the hotel, they found out that they'll be able to pick the seating for the next day because they were the first one rescheduled. And so since they were the first one rescheduled, they get to pick their seat for the next day. And while they were in the elevator going upstairs, they noticed their baggage had been torn and ripped, but the man next to them had a roll of duct tape right there to help them patch the luggage right there on the spot. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.